They told you she was an angel, that somewhere out there, a woman existed who would heal your wounds, calm your chaos, and offer you the kind of love that would finally make you whole. You heard it in every story, every song, every whispered promise of happily ever after. From the time you were a boy, the world trained you to believe that a woman was the prize, the answer, the missing piece of your incomplete soul. And you believed it, desperately, because believing was easier than facing the silence inside you. It was easier to imagine that someone out there could rescue you from the loneliness you refused to confront. It was easier to hope for salvation wrapped in a soft smile than to admit that the emptiness gnawed at you long before you ever met her. But here's the betrayal no one warned you about. She was never the salvation you craved. She was never the angel they painted in your bedtime stories. She was something else entirely. And the saddest part, it wasn't her fault. It was yours. Because you didn't want the truth. You wanted the illusion. You didn't love her. You loved what she made you feel about yourself. You loved the idea that you were worthy, that you were chosen, that you mattered. And she simply became the mirror you needed to believe that lie. The first betrayal was not when she left. It was the moment you decided to build your self-worth on a fantasy, so fragile it shattered the second she stopped playing along. And yet, you still chase it, still kneel before it, still beg for it, like a man dying of thirst, sipping from a mirage. This isn't about her. It never was. It's about the prison you built inside your own mind, and the key you willingly handed over. Aristotle didn't hate women. He didn't sit in some ancient courtyard, scribbling bitter words out of spite. No, he simply observed nature without the filters that you and I were conditioned to wear. He stripped away the myths, the poetry, the desperate need to romanticize, and he saw something brutal, something unspoken even now. He saw that the female was not a divine counterpart, not a mystical balance to masculine chaos, but a different form altogether, a form shaped by survival, not salvation, a deviation, not a compliment. The female is, as it were, a mutilated male. It wasn't an insult. It wasn't an attack. It was recognition, a brutal acknowledgement that nature doesn't care about your fairy tales. It only cares about adaptability, replication, endurance. You were taught to believe she was your missing half, your light in the darkness, your healer, your muse, your reward for being a good man. But Aristotle knew better. He saw that women, like all life forms shaped by necessity, evolved not to complete you, but to navigate you, to bend, to adapt, to master subtlety, because raw power was never hers to wield. And while you dreamed of love stories, she studied the art of survival. While you memorized fairy tales, she memorized your weaknesses. Not out of malice, but out of instinct. Because when you are not the default, when you are not the builder of empires or the writer of laws, you learn to survive by mastering what others refuse to see. And you refused to see it, because you needed her to be something she never promised to be. And she simply became what you needed her to be, until it no longer served her. You thought you loved her. You were convinced of it, the way your heart raced when she smiled, the way your chest ached when she turned away, the way you would have given anything, to be her everything. But it wasn't her you loved. It was the wound she made you forget, the gaping hole inside you that you were too terrified to face, the ache for approval, the hunger to matter, the desperate need to feel chosen, if only for a little while. She didn't heal that wound. She disguised it. She wrapped it in a smile, in a soft voice, in moments of attention so fleeting you mistook them for eternity. And you clung to every scrap like a starving man clings to crumbs. You didn't see her for who she was. You saw what you needed her to be. And she saw it too. She saw the fractures in you, the cracks where your self-worth leaked out. She saw the desperation you tried to hide behind jokes, bravado, promises of loyalty. And she adapted, not because she was cruel, but because survival demands it. She didn't need to overpower you. She only needed to reflect the version of her that would make you stay, the version that would make you surrender willingly. You thought you were winning her heart, but all along, you were bargaining pieces of your soul, trading authenticity for attachment, trading masculinity for the illusion of being loved. And the tragedy, the deepest, most devastating tragedy, is that she never had to deceive you. You did it to yourself. She never needed to raise her voice. She never needed to force your hand. Because real control doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It soothes. It wraps itself around your mind so gently that you call it love. You thought she was emotional. You thought her tears, her laughter, her silences were spontaneous. But behind every expression was calculation. Behind every affection was measurement. Behind every reaction was adaptation. She scanned you like a battlefield medic scans a wounded soldier, searching for entry points, mapping your vulnerabilities, cataloging every word you said when you thought she wasn't paying attention, every compliment you gave, every insecurity you revealed, every ambition you confessed late at night when your defenses were down. She archived it all, not because she hated you, but because she had to, in a world where brute strength built empires. Her power could only come from mastering the invisible wars. The wars fought in glances, in silences, in tiny shifts of emotion. She learned early that men don't fall for truth. They fall for the reflection of their fantasies. And she learned to become that reflection. Polished, precise, deadly. You thought her softness was a sanctuary. It wasn't. It was a scalpel, delicately slicing away your strength while you mistook the bleeding for bonding. You never stood a chance. Not because she was evil, but because you were unarmed in a battlefield you didn't even know you were standing in. And by the time you realized it, you were already kneeling, grateful, desperate, and blind. You thought love would lift you. You thought it would elevate you into some higher, nobler version of yourself. You thought it would be the ladder pulling you out of loneliness, out of fear, out of the gnawing sense that something inside you was broken. But it wasn't a ladder. It was a leash, and you wrapped it around your own neck. Every compliment she gave you, every glance of approval, every whispered promise of forever, tightened the leash just a little more. You didn't notice at first. It felt good, it felt safe, it felt warm. You mistook dependency for intimacy. You mistook permission for partnership. You thought you were rising, but you were shrinking into a version of yourself that lived for her validation. Shrinking into a man who second-guessed his words, his thoughts, his instincts. Shrinking into a ghost of the man you once dreamed of becoming. And every time you bent a little more, every time you silenced your truth to keep her smiling, every time you erased a part of yourself to stay in her good graces, you felt the leash tighten, and you called it devotion. You called it sacrifice. You called it love. But real love doesn't demand your leash. Real love doesn't thrive on your erasure. Real love doesn't ask you to shrink into nothingness just to be tolerated. She didn't have to enslave you. You volunteered. And the worst part, the part that guts you when you're finally alone with the silence, is realizing you weren't loving her at all. You were bargaining, begging, performing, willing to trade your freedom for a momentary illusion of being enough. You thought you won her. You thought you conquered something rare and precious. You thought your devotion, your loyalty, your sacrifices made her yours. But you were never the owner. You were always the owned. From the very beginning, she didn't seek to possess you. She sought to become indispensable. She didn't need to chain you to her side. She just needed you to chain yourself to the dream she mirrored back at you. Every touch, every tear, every tender word wasn't a promise. It was a reinforcement of the story you so desperately needed to believe. She wasn't there to love you. She was there to reflect the man you hoped you were. The man you hoped anyone would finally validate. And when she smiled at you, when she cried for you, when she whispered that she needed you, she wasn't offering herself. She was offering the idea of yourself. The idea you were too afraid to build on your own. You thought you were claiming her heart, but it was your identity she claimed, piece by fragile piece. And when the reflection no longer served her, when the performance grew tiresome, when your usefulness expired, she didn't leave you. She left the role. And you were left clinging to a ghost, not of her, but of the man you only knew how to be when she was watching. She was never yours. She never needed to be. Because you were always hers. You thought her love was pure. You thought it was raw, untamed, unconditional. But it wasn't love at all. It was calibration. She didn't open her heart to you. She opened her senses, studying every word you spoke, every flicker of hesitation in your eyes, every tremor in your voice when you were scared of losing her. She learned you, faster and deeper than you ever learned yourself. She didn't listen for truth. She listened for patterns. She didn't crave connection. She craved control over your emotional rhythm. When you revealed your childhood fears, she didn't nurture them. She bookmarked them for future leverage. When you spoke of your dreams, she didn't admire them. She measured them, calculated how much of your ambition could be redirected toward her needs. When you let her see your scars, she didn't weep. She mapped them, like a general mapping the weaknesses of an enemy fortress. Every I love you whispered, every apology you stammered, every tear you shed, became another coordinate, another access point, another subtle, silent string wrapped around your will. And you called it intimacy. You called it vulnerability. You called it trust. But she didn't fall into your arms out of love. She placed herself there. Precisely. Deliberately. Strategically. You weren't loved. You were managed. And the tragedy is, you still don't see it. You still think the tears were real. The kisses were spontaneous. The affection was sacred. You still need to believe that, because the alternative is too unbearable. Because admitting she calibrated you means admitting you were never seen, only scanned. You thought she changed. You thought she grew cold, distant, heartless. You thought you did something wrong. But the truth is far darker. She didn't change. She simply stopped pretending. The reflection you fell in love with. The version of her that echoed your hopes, your dreams, your hunger for meaning. It was never truly her. It was a role, a carefully crafted character designed to keep you orbiting. Dependent, predictable, and when she no longer needed you, when your utility expired, the mask slipped, the warmth faded, the affection dried up, the endless patience you once admired turned to cold, clinical calculation. You were stunned. You were broken. You kept asking yourself, where did she go? But she was never there. Not really. What you lost wasn't her love. What you lost was the illusion that she ever truly loved you. The illusion that you were seen. That you were valued beyond your ability to provide validation, attention, resources, or the emotional highs she fed on. You didn't lose her. You lost the man you thought you were when she was smiling at you, and standing there in the wreckage, confused, shattered, grieving a fantasy you mistook for reality. You are forced to confront a brutal truth. You were never in a relationship with her. You were in a relationship with your own reflection, projected onto the first woman willing to mirror it back. And now that the mirror is shattered, all that remains is the hollow echo of the man you tried so desperately to become. For her, you used to have edges. You used to have opinions that burned in your chest, dreams that kept you awake at night, a spine that made you stand tall even when the world tried to bend you. But somewhere along the way, you started sanding those edges down. You smiled when you wanted to roar. You agreed when you wanted to rebel. You shrank when you should have stood your ground. And you told yourself it was love. You told yourself it was maturity. You told yourself it was sacrifice. But it wasn't. It was fear. Fear of losing the reflection she gave you. Fear of returning to the emptiness you thought she had cured. Fear of facing the truth that without her gaze, you weren't sure you even existed. So you gave more, and more, and more, until there was almost nothing left to give. And when the final pieces of you slipped through your fingers, when you had nothing left but exhaustion and resentment, she looked at you and didn't see a man. She saw a resource, a utility, a pattern of predictable responses she no longer needed. You thought you were building love. You were building your own captivity. You thought you were growing together. You were dissolving into her convenience. And now you sit in the ruins, wondering how you became so empty, so invisible, so hollow. But the truth is, you didn't lose yourself because of her. You lost yourself because you were willing to erase who you were, just to be seen. While you were dreaming of forever, she was studying. While you were writing poetry in your mind, she was mapping out your weaknesses like a cartographer charts a coastline. While you whispered promises of loyalty, she was decoding every insecurity you tried to hide. She didn't need to fight you. She didn't need to argue, to dominate, to demand. She simply observed, learned your rhythm, anticipated your reactions, and positioned herself exactly where your defenses were weakest. Because when men were busy conquering kingdoms, women were mastering the kingdom of the unseen, the realm of emotions, instincts, and vulnerabilities. She didn't build walls. She slipped through the cracks you refused to admit existed. She didn't seize power. She let you hand it over, gratefully, blindly. Every compliment you craved, every apology you rushed to offer, every moment of hesitation you showed when her approval felt distant. She memorized it, filed it away, stored it like ammunition for the day leverage was needed. You thought she admired your strength. She admired your predictability. You thought she loved your honesty. She cataloged your patterns. And by the time you realized the game you were in, you had already lost. Not because she outsmarted you, but because you never knew you were playing. While you were building castles in the sky, she was laying claim to the very ground you stood on. Quietly, relentlessly, inevitably. And you called it love. You called it chemistry. You called it destiny. You called it soul connection. But it wasn't chemistry. It wasn't destiny. It wasn't love. It was psychological warfare. Every word she chose, every tear she shed, every silence she allowed to stretch just long enough to make you uneasy. None of it was random. None of it was accidental. It was strategy, refined by survival, perfected by centuries of silent battles fought in living rooms, bedrooms, and empty text message screens. You thought you were building trust. You were being conditioned. You thought you were opening your heart. You were surrendering your leverage. You thought you were sharing your soul. You were offering your blueprint. And she read it like a seasoned general studies the enemy's map before the battle even begins. Every "I miss you," every "I'm just scared," every "I need you" was a calibration, a test, a tightening of the leash. Not because she hated you, not because she sought to destroy you, but because survival demands power. And when brute strength is not an option, emotional mastery becomes necessity. She didn't need to overpower you physically. She conquered you emotionally, and you thanked her for it. You didn't fall in love. You fell into formation, marching to the rhythm of her unspoken commands. Smiling, grateful, blind. You have a choice now, a brutal, merciless choice. You can cling to the fantasy, cling to the bedtime stories they told you as a boy. Cling to the dream that somewhere out there, a woman exists who will love you without strategy, without calculation, without survival whispering in her ear. Or you can face the truth. You can burn it all. Every illusion, every fairy tale, every desperate hope that someone else will complete you. You can stand in the ruins, alone, naked, unarmed, and finally begin the real work. The work of becoming a man who no longer needs to be chosen to feel valuable. A man who no longer mistakes affection for salvation. A man who no longer trades his sovereignty for scraps of emotional validation. Because if you don't, you will die a slave. Not a slave to her, a slave to your own blindness. You will continue to beg for crumbs from tables that were never set for you. You will continue to hand over your power to anyone who smiles at your emptiness. And you will call it love. You will call it destiny. You will call it fate. But deep down, where the lies can no longer reach, you will know. You will know you chose comfort over truth, illusion over clarity, obedience over freedom, and you will rot in the cage you built with your own hands, still dreaming of a woman who was never real. Burn your illusions, or die a slave. There is no middle ground. There is a man she cannot break, a man she cannot bend, mold, or quietly consume. Not because he is cruel, not because he is distant, but because he is sovereign. He does not beg for approval. He does not crumble under silence. He does not confuse attention with affection. He sees her clearly. He sees the strategy, the calibration, the emotional warfare. And he does not hate her for it. He simply refuses to be captured by it. He stands, rooted in himself, complete, unbothered. When she withholds affection, he doesn't chase. When she mirrors his fantasies, he doesn't lose himself in the reflection. When she tests his boundaries, he doesn't bend to keep her approval. He understands something most men never will. That true connection cannot be built on performance. That love, real love, cannot survive where sovereignty is sacrificed. And because he does not need her, because he does not orbit her moods, her needs, her strategies, she feels something rare, something terrifying, something magnetic. Respect. She may push harder. She may try to reshape him, to provoke him, to pull him back into the dance of dependency. But he stands firm. And in that firmness, in that refusal to kneel, he becomes the one thing she cannot conquer. Not because he dominates her, but because he refuses to dominate himself to please her. And in that space, in that raw, uncomfortable space where illusions die, something real can finally begin. Let it burn. Let every soft lie they fed you turn to ash. Let every fragile hope of being saved collapse under the weight of its own delusion. Let the pedestal crack. Let the fantasy drown. Let the dream of being chosen, adored, completed, die. Because it was never love. It was never destiny. It was never salvation. It was survival. It was adaptation. It was choreography disguised as chemistry. And you were never the hero of the story. You were the captive, the performer, the offering. But now you have a choice. You can mourn the death of the illusion, or you can celebrate the birth of your freedom. You can curse her for being strategic, or you can thank her for exposing the part of you that was willing to sell your soul for a few drops of affection. You can collapse into bitterness, or you can rise into sovereignty. Because real freedom doesn't come from finding the right woman. Real freedom comes from no longer needing a woman to validate your existence. Stand alone, not in hatred, not in arrogance, but in truth. See her clearly, see yourself clearly, and walk forward, not looking for someone to complete you, but carrying a completeness so strong, so undeniable, that no one can ever hold you captive again. Let it burn. Stand alone. Be free.